by raising your virtual hand or making a comment in the comments box. So I think we're ready to go, Mr. White. Apologies for absence. I haven't had any.
I haven't either, Chair, and for the record, we have all 9 hub members on the call. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. So members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Does anyone wish to declare, make a declaration of interest? I'm not getting anything coming forward, Mr. White, so we'll take that as a no.
Thank you, Chair.
Items requiring urgent attention. I don't have any.
Neither do I, Chair.
So we will move on then to confirmation of minutes. So members, you have the last set of minutes in front of you. They were circulated as part of the supplementary pack. So we will just go through those minutes for completeness, if I may. So we can just run through those. The first page on which the minutes is agenda item 4. The first page is logged as page 1. Any comments? Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. And page 5. So can I take that then as being a full and fair reflection of the meeting and agree the minutes for signature, Mr. White? If anyone could indicate.
Nobody indicating, Chair, so I think we can assume they're unanimously approved. Thank you, Chair.
We'll take that as approved. Thank you. Public questions. I have not been advised of any public questions.
That's correct, Chair.
So I will move on to agenda item 6, Hub Committee Forward Plan. It's a standing item on the agenda. We considered the forward plan at the last meeting. Perhaps any members of the committee would raise any questions they have now about the forward plan and any items that are on there. I think I've got a hand that is up.
Councillor Cheadle, Chair.
Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you, Neil. I've just got one question on the forward plan. We have discussed, I'm not sure it was in the hub or outside the hub, that the practice that we had previously agreed to, which was that each lead member of the hub would present from time to time an update of his portfolio and progress made. And we seem to have sort of slipped out of that habit. And I wonder if we could reintroduce it and annotate the forward plan with when those updates might be given.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. You're quite right. And we had discussed that. And I think it slipped off the agenda whilst we were in full COVID response mode. It's actually a very good item, I think, to have on the agenda. And I'd very much welcome that coming back with a bit of clarity about when each area is going to be examined and scrutinised. So if you will leave that with me, I will liaise with Mr. White and the various lead members, and we will get that onto the forward plan. So I very much appreciate your suggestion.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
That's all I had.
Any other questions on the forward plan, members? In which case, we will take that as agreed. I think, Mr. White.
Thank you, Chair.
we'll move on to agenda item 7. So agenda item 7 is the month 7 revenue budget monitoring for the current year up to the end of October 2020. If I could please ask Councillor Edmonds to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This revenue budget monitoring report covers the 7-month period from the 1st of April to the 31st of October 2020, during which period the Council lost 712,000 of income, 397 of which relates to car parking income. And the projected loss of car parking income for the year is 620,000. Now, if I can perhaps ask Mr. White to move to the table which can be found on page 10, please. Table 1 on page 10 of your agenda papers sets out the significant budget variations with explanatory notes for each item. The Council received a welcome £970,000 in additional income during the period of the report, thanks mainly to government COVID grants. I'll just pause there. Darryl, is it possible to move to page 10 of the agenda, please? Maybe just helpful to have that table in front of us. Excellent. And if we just go back one page. Thank you. And there you can see the subtotal of the additional income at 970,000. If we can just move on to page 11 now, please, Darryl. A provision for bad debts of £140,000 has been raised, which may not be required, or at least not all of it. But it is intended to cover sundry debts such as licensing fees, overpayment of housing benefit and car parking fines. It is difficult to gauge the loss of income from commercial properties and employment estates. So a ballpark figure of 15% has been used, which is in line with estimates being made by other councils. Now, towards the end of table 1, the projected outturn figure at the year end is £7.8 million compared to the approved budget of £7.2 million, a predicted overspend for the year of 640,000. So below this figure, we can see the anticipated income from government in respect of the income guarantee scheme of 449,000, most of which will be in respect of car parking income. The figure of 501,000 represents the budget gap identified in the September member budget workshop, with members agreeing to finance this sum using one-off funding sources. So if we add these two items together and subtract the projected overspend of 640,000, it results in a year-end surplus position of £310,000. The report recommends that a sum of 220,000 be transferred to a COVID earmarked reserve, with the remaining 90,000 underspend transferred to unallocated reserves. This is a complete contrast to the May budget monitoring report, which had a predicted budget overspend of £1 million for the current year, which indicates the rapidly changing financial position Mrs. Buckle and her team have had to respond to during the year. I don't think any of us could have envisaged receiving government support of 1.2 million. And this is not a political statement. I think the government has stepped up to the plate in their support for councils during the pandemic. Submission of the Delta returns by all councils has helped the government to understand the severity of the financial position in local government. And let us not forget the lobbying by our Chief Exec, Mrs. Buckle, Councillor Jory and South West councils. Some further good news: the government has confirmed that the income guarantee scheme will continue into the first 3 months of the next financial year, by which time we should hopefully see life returning to something near normal, whatever that looks like. The report mentions a tax income guarantee scheme for 2020-21. The scheme will reimburse 75% of irrecoverable council tax and business rates revenue in 2021. Touching briefly on reserves as detailed in Appendix A, we can see that the projected amount of earmarked reserves as at the 31st of March is 3,436,000. This is after taking into account the support provided to Fusion, Town Centres Initiative and Broadband Community Project. Unearmarked reserves are projected to be 1.176, including the 90,000 underspend referred to in this report. Section 7 of the report sets out details of the proposal to partner with Tavistock Town Council to provide audio-visual equipment for the Guildhall. And in conclusion, Chair, there are 4 report recommendations which can be found on page 7 of the agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Members, are there any questions about the nature, the content of the report? Councillor Cheadle.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to thank the team for pulling together all this figure work. As Councillor Edmonds said, it was a complete turnaround from where we thought we might be. And of course, we're not at the end yet. So there's probably a few more twists and turns to come. But I wonder if Councillor Edmonds or Mrs. Buckle could just, we've had a sort of blizzard of various different figures put forward to us, but in simple terms, if I could put it that way, with all the government help that we've had and all the loss of revenue that we've suffered and the movement of money from reserves hither and thither, is it possible to compare where we are now to where we were before the virus, the impact of the virus started in terms of our financial well-being? It's a difficult question to ask, I know, but just for those that haven't been following the figures, you know, minute by minute, all the ups and downs, how are our reserves compared with where they were to start with, and how's our overall budget position compared with where we were before the virus started?
Well, if I perhaps just have a stab at that one, and I'm sure Mrs. Buckle will also have some input. But interestingly, I had this kind of conversation with Mrs. Buckle yesterday, and we were trying to work out how much really this has cost the council, both in terms of revenue and in reserves. And I think the figure that we arrived at, and I guess it does need more time to finalise the figure, but I think we're looking at, in terms of lost revenue, net revenue loss after receipt of government support, in the region of 180,000, and I think that's the figure that we came up with yesterday. In terms of reserves, I would need to look back to obviously the reserves figure, I guess, at the start of the year. But in terms of COVID related, if we're looking at the support given to Fusion, we know that I think from memory is in the region of 436,000 pounds. So those are the two figures that we kind of identified yesterday, but perhaps I can defer to Mrs. Buck, who may have something to add to that information.
Thank you, Councillor Esmonds. Yes, I agree with those figures. Yes, we did do a reconciliation along those lines. And yes, the net impact is around about 180,000, as Councillor Edmonds said. The main impact on our reserves, earmark reserves were 4.9 million at the point that we closed our accounts at 31st of March. As per the Appendix A, those are predicted to be 3.4 million at the end of next March 2021. The main reason for the decrease is, as Councillor Edmonds has said, the amount of funding with regards to fusion and leisure has been 436,000, and there are some further recommendations on today's report with regards to reserves. So, for example, there's a recommendation to fund 30,000 for the audiovisual equipment and a recommendation to transfer 220 into a COVID earmark reserve. The other main reason that reserves would have decreased over the year is due to the vehicle replacement reserve. That did have a balance of 400,000 in March 2020, and due to the purchasing of the fleet, that balance will all be utilised by the end of this financial year. So those are the main reasons. And I think hopefully that's a summary of where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Does that help, Councillor Cheadle?
Yeah, I think that's very, very useful. Thanks very much. Can I just come back on one point? The transfer of money to Fusion, that was on the assumption that it would be consumed, or if it wasn't consumed, it would be, in a sense, returned. We would only pay for genuine costs incurred. Is it a reasonable assumption to assume that all that money, in a sense, has left and will not return?
I'm happy to take that question, Leader.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle.
Yes, so we are on the support package to Fusion is on an open accounting basis. So we are paying on actuals. So that 436 is the maximum amount of support. We are hoping that month on month, we did have the lockdown period in November, but if we can increase the uses of those leisure centres and increase the income, we are hoping that the final amount that we will pay will be below that because that's the maximum threshold, and we will be paying on actuals in arrears on a monthly basis. It is on an open accounting basis, so we do look at some of the invoices for expenditure and analyse some of the figures on a monthly basis. So we are hoping it will be below that. The figures so far, the last set of figures that I've seen for the previous couple of months, it is coming in slightly less than the monthly figures. We have had some heads up that Sport England are going to be launching the National Leisure Recovery Fund soon with local authorities that have outsourced leisure provision. And that funding will be to assist with the additional costs of operating the service, but it will be focused on the period from 1st December 2020 to next March, the 31st of March. So although we haven't seen the details behind the 100 million which has been announced by the government for support for councils that have got an outsourced leisure provision, we are hopeful that something will come out on that in the next few days. And the idea is that fund will complement the scheme for those which have had an in-house provision, and it will also enable Sport England to access and monitor the recovery of sports facilities. So when that scheme is announced and the details are known, we certainly will be putting in an application for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just point 4 there, recommend to council to fund £30,000 of audio-visual equipment to the Tavistock Guildhall Heritage Project. I as you know, on the Cornwall and West Devon Mining Heritage Partnership, and also I was on the Townscape Heritage Initiative, where as one of the trustees, where we established where to spend funding on buildings in Tavistock. It was a very exciting project, and basically the funding went on to the envelopes of buildings just to secure them. And I'm sure we've all seen how lovely One Church Lane is, and the Butcher's Hall and what have you. What I just think is that there's lessons to be learnt here, that clearly when we've had many officers over the years working on this project, that then we never really looked at the funding of doing the nice things, you know, furnishing the shop or getting the audio visual equipment and things like that. So it's most unlikely that there's ever going to be a big project like that in Tavistock, but there might be in West Devon. I don't know, but I think that we have to realise that whenever officers go into any of these exciting projects, that we have to be mindful of how much money we actually need to complete these initiatives. I was fortunate that I was able to grant £7,500 towards the Guildhall project for the information centre, but you know, clearly that wasn't enough. So I do, because officers tend to be more permanent as such, rather than councillors, that we do need to future-proof how we finance these initiatives. And I think we're very fortunate that West Devon Borough Council, as one of the partners, is able to find £30,000 in this financial climate. So really that was just a point of observation, Leader. I think it's just something that they need to think at. That we must have known that there was going to be a reception area, or we need this equipment, but I don't recall that ever being mentioned. So lessons learned, I suggest.
No, I think your point is well made, Councillor Sellis. We've been approached fairly late in the day, and I think there's a number of things that have come together here, including the availability of grant funding in the COVID crisis and the additional expense that crisis has caused to the whole project. It's a really important project. I think as a council, we've been very supportive of it, although the main lead on it has been the Tavistock Heritage Trust in partnership with the Tavistock Town Council. But we're really pleased that we've been able to help out in this situation. I think it is a quite unusual situation, but your point is well made, and thank you for that. Are there any other questions, members? If not, I think if I could ask Councillor Edmonds to move the recommendations. Yes,
thank you, Chair. As I mentioned, the 4 recommendations are set out. I think it's on page 7. So I'm happy to move those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can we have a seconder?
Happy to second those.
Thank you. And any debate, members? I've got nobody coming forward. Councillor Cheadle.
Well, I was just going to say that I think, you know, we were all holding our breath as the COVID crisis rolled through, and sort of hiding behind the sofa, hoping that the financial impact of it wouldn't be absolutely devastating. And it's very pleasing, and it's down to a lot of hard work, enthusiasm, and other things that we seem to have come out of this with the relatively small dent in our finance that we've had. And I'd just like to, in a sense, pay tribute to Mrs. Buckle and her team for sort of holding their nerve and holding other people to account and finding a way through this. Very well done.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I'd just like to echo that, if I may. I remember when this all kicked off, basically saying we needed to tear our budget up and just get on with doing what we needed to do, and I think we did that to some extent. It's been very pleasing to see the support that has come through for the role that district councils have been carrying out, and I have to say that there have been discussions going on constantly at district councils network level involving ministers week in, week out, and that the Ministry for Local Government, Housing, Communities and Local Government has been exceptional in putting the case of local government and supporting local government to the Treasury in order to secure the finance that we've got. It's a great recognition, I think, of the role that we have played. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to echo Councillor Cheadle's remarks. I mean, once again, Mrs. Buckle has done, and her team have done an excellent job in very difficult circumstances. And I think, we can see the effects that COVID is having on all councils' finances. It really has been a grim year so far. With regard to the 30,000 for the Tavistock Guildhall Heritage Project, I really welcome this, because after so much uncertainty years ago of what was going to happen to the Guildhall, and it was a very difficult time, I think it's the least we can do to support this, which is going to be a very important part of West Devon and going to be a major asset for Tavistock Town. So I really welcome and I'm really pleased that we are able to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Chief Exec and I were privileged enough to have a tour of the building site last week, and it is going to be a superb facility for Tavistock, I believe. Councillor Cheadle, did you want to come back on any point, or is that a recalcitrant hand? Councillor Cheadle, you still have your hand up. Did you want to make another comment?
No, sorry, I just forgot to put my hand down. I'll do that now. Okay.
Councillor Ewings.
Thank you, Councillor Jury. I would like to echo the sentiments that have been expressed already, but actually go on to say that hopefully once the Guildhall is open fully in the spring, that actually with the visitors and hopefully staycationers next year, will be coming to Tavistock to see the Guildhall and what it has to offer. This will hopefully help us in our car parking budget, that we can get some monies back in again through this project, and it's hopefully a win-win for both authorities. And as a town councillor, I would like to thank West Devon for supporting this to the tune of 30,000 for the audio-visual equipment. Thank you, Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think it's going to be a very central part of our ongoing strategy for attracting visitors into Tavistock and the wider borough. So it's a really important venture and really important connection to the World Heritage Mining Site. I'm not getting anybody else wanting to add to the debate, so I think, Mr. White, we'll move to a vote, and I would suggest that as we're committing some funds here, we should take that named vote.
Thank you, Chair. So therefore, members, in alphabetical order, Councillor Cheadle.
I'm for all the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Jury.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Mr. White. Before I do, I just need to declare that I am also a town councillor, if that could be recorded, please, but I am for the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Councillor Mott.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
For all the recommendations as set out.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Sellis.
For.
Thank you, members. That is therefore 9 and unanimous for those 4 recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. White, and thank you, councillors. So we'll move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the draft revenue budget proposals for 21-22. You'll see in front of you a paper which sets out the recommendations for the budget for next year. It notes that there's a forecast budget gap that we're looking at the moment, and we will be obviously bringing proposals forward in due course to close that gap, which will be the subject of debate amongst councillors, and also notes the current options identified and timescales for closing that budget gap. It's again a very comprehensive report and sets out the next steps in enforcing the medium-term financial strategy. So, members, I commend the report to you and would be happy with Mrs. Buckle's assistance to take any questions. So I'm not getting any questions coming forward, members. I guess the real meat of this comes later in the process, and it's important that we note where we are at the moment. So I will move forward and move the recommendations, and the recommendations are as shown on the screen, but also on page 25 of the supplementary papers that have been sent out to members. So I'd like to move those on block. Could I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. Members, any debate about the draft revenue budget proposals for next year? I'm not getting anything coming forward, so I
Councillor Sellis, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Sellis.
Thank you. I'd just like to add that it's very reassuring being able to read such well set out documents. And I think that if any members of the public were listening and think, oh crumbs, we don't actually discuss stuff, it's because it is so well explained. I find that when I'm reading it, I'll think, oh, I wonder what that is. And then it'll be in the appendix in the letter bit, you know, it'll be A, B, C, D or whatever. So again, you know, thanks to the finance team for making it what could be very turgid and that a very much more comfortable read than I'm sure some people could create. So that's just giving anybody who's possibly listening just some reassurance that we do actually read some very good documents and statistics, etc. Very informative.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis. Yes, I'd echo those comments, and it's a very well written and comprehensive report. I'm not getting anything further coming forward, so I think we'll take that to a vote. In view of the contents of the recommendations and the lack of debate, I'd be happy to take that at the moment, Mr. White, just on by exception.
Agree, so thank you, Chair.
If anybody would like
just open the process.
If any member would like to indicate if they are not prepared to support the recommendations, either by way of abstention or voting against, perhaps you'd indicate now. Otherwise, we will take that as a vote in favour, Mr. White.
Thank you, Chair. I've just given it a couple of seconds, and there's no one either typing or showing their hands the contrary. So therefore, members, that is unanimously in favour. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the scheduled papers for the meeting. So I'd like to thank you all again for your attendance, and thank you for your contribution, members, and thank you particularly to Mrs. Buckle and her team for the very comprehensive and thorough reports that have been submitted to today's meeting. And I look forward to seeing all of you at the full council meeting a little bit later this afternoon. So thank you very much, everybody, and meeting closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.